Party is capable of reconnecting with fundamental rights and freedoms in the way that it really, really should and it really, really must, because a lot of bad stuff is happening in this country.
In terms of blacklisting, let's be clear, labour rights are human rights. When we go out as Europe and talk to third countries about human rights, freedom association is one of those absolute core rights, and you are quite right to be doing the work that you were doing, and it's not at all party political for you to do so. But I want to give a plug to the Welsh Government, coming from the east of England, as far away from Wales as possible. You have introduced into your procurement rules, companies won't get contracts from your government if they blacklist. What a fantastic example of that.
Hundreds, thousands of people in the construction industry were denied jobs, were denied their livelihood secretly because they were put on a list where they weren't going to be employed. They never knew about it, they just couldn't get jobs. Absolutely poor. Far bigger than the phone hacking inquiry. Phone hacking inquiry, Lord Chief Justice or whatever he is, Lord Leveson, actually was called in to do inquiry. Where is the inquiry into blacklisting? There is no inquiry. And the reason there is no inquiry is I think it's going to go into some nasty, dark, sinister places, and you will see the involvement of the security services and the police. That's why they don't want it to can of worms. When it's opened, it's going to look very unpleasant, but it has to be open, and I suspect this hasn't happened only in the construction industry.
Blacklisting is part and parcel of an anti-trade union atmosphere which has held sway since the Thatcher years, and it's actually about the undermining of trade union rights and freedoms.
I think blacklisting is in different forms. And I think the one that sort of came through media the other day was around blacklisting and looking at us as a family and other trade unions and other people who are sort of around justice and equality. So blacklisting could come in any form, because to hear that during our time of grief, that's exactly what the police was trying to do to us as a family, and not just to us, but to other people who are fighting our corner. So when you think of individuals out there and what they're trying to do to support and to get justice, and to realise that the police was out there trying to dirt on us as a family and other people, as I was saying. So blacklisting can come in all different forms. So it's not just like within the workforce, but in other forms.
A brief word about Syria. I think it's quite an astonishing achievement. I think it'd be hard for anybody to point at any other time in recent history I can think of where an opposition leader in what was then called a small island has actually stopped the Americans and the French going forward.
It does not seem to me that the circumstances in which the government were trying to bounce us into war were anywhere near what the requirements would be needed for humanitarian intervention, even if we were to agree that humanitarian intervention was still what would be called international law. Because we only had the agreement of France and America and Britain. And why were the French going in? The French were going in order to punish. Well, that's illegal. And the Americans were going in and saying, we should change the regime. Well, that's not legal. So these are the people we're going in with. And exactly on what grounds are we going in, and how confident could we be that it was really legal? These were the sort of questions that needed to be answered, but we could not, over a couple of days, resolve those and be confident that we were doing the right thing. Now that's just the legal side. I say there were all the other questions that needed answering too, but it was my job as shadow AG to give that advice, and that's the advice I gave.
The second thing that's important to me as a parliamentarian is that we emphasise that in the end it must be the British people through their members of Parliament that decide whether we go to war or not. Because I remember being in Parliament for the original Gulf War. We had some sort of debate, but the troops were already mobilised. A lot of people thought they couldn't vote against the Gulf War because our troops were on their way. The same is true really about the Iraq War. People felt torn. But this time we had a vote in time. And I have to tell you, there were people on both sides of the House who had gone through the experience of the Iraq War, felt, right or wrongly, that they were lied to, and felt they were not going to make that mistake again. And there's a reason why Cameron would not bring it back for a second vote. Because had Cameron Syria back for a second vote to go to war, even more Tories would have voted against him. I know, I spoke to them.
So we're just reminding ourselves how we police by consent. So we rely upon members of the public coming forward reporting crime, witnesses coming forward to give evidence, and communities having confidence in the police and the authorities. How are you tomorrow going to ask somebody to come forward and report crime if today you've wrongfully stopped and searched them? And or if there are reasons to stop and search them, if you've been mistreated or if they've been mistreated during the course of that stop and search. I say this, and I was saying this in my speech on Wednesday for reasons that I hope you understand. Listen, the reason why victims of rape aren't cross-examined by their attackers personally is because of human rights. The reason why bereaved families get to find out what happened to their loved ones is because of human rights. The reason why modern-day victims of slavery, those who are trafficked, can have redress is because of human rights. We forget what human rights does at our peril. I discovered today, Emily, Tooks Court is closing down. So Tooks Court, this is the chambers that brought us Mike Mansfield, Vera Baird, lawyers who took on cases that were unwinnable, minors, Hillsborough. It's closing down. What do they say in their press release today? We're closing down because of the government's legal aid cuts. And Doreen knows this better than I do. The legal team that helped Doreen and her family came from Tooks Court. They're closing down. It doesn't stop there.
And we were great chambers, and we closed down because of legal aid cuts. And we did great work, and yeah, and the Guildford 4, Birmingham 6, the Lawrence family, all the cases came through Tooks Court, and yeah, so I feel very strongly about legal aid cuts. I feel very strongly about legal aid cuts. I have to say, the case which brought it home to me, right, about whether or not they've really changed judicial review in order to bring it to what it ought to be, because you know that horrible story about that poor young woman who was forced to commit oral sex on her jailers in Yarlswood, right? She will not get legal aid on the current system to sue those jailers, right? So, don't tell me, right, that their new proposals are fine on judicial review. We still have a fight on our hands in relation to judicial review, and it is not about saving money. It is about constitutional language, which is that they are trying to undermine the accountability of government and public bodies to the courts, and we have to fight it.
New Labour's record of Labour politics feels not a good one, and Kevin start that out. I remember particularly the debate on Nancy Gates. People forget, the point about Nancy Gates' attention for that trial was that you wouldn't be told what you were being held for. And I got in Parliament and said, if we pass this, Muslim women are going to come to my first surgery. It wouldn't be Muslims and BME people. They come to my first surgery, sit in front of me and say, they've got my boy, they've had him for 3 months, I don't know why. And I said to the House, what will I say to that woman? Fortunately, we were able to push it back, but it wasn't New Labour's fighting staff. I have to say, speaking as a London MP, it's really important that Labour's leadership in London is prepared to stand up on these issues, because sometimes the people you're defending might not be very attractive, might not be very sympathetic, might not be people that people like, and of course you have to teach. Sadiq said you have to teach, but sometimes on civil liberties and human rights and race, sometimes we have to take a position in advance of where the public are, because it's the right position, it's the position we're going to have to live with our consciences.